Different Fragments time, same Silicon channel.
Well, that's not true either, since we're using the Discord again. Like,
That's true.
yeah, it's like
Well, it's the same Twitch channel,
fair enough,
but you know what I mean.
right? So, welcome to this special Friday morning edition of Fragments of Silicon. Yeah, it's all sorts of weird times this week because that's kind of how the dice rolled. I mean, Wednesday's guest was from the UK, and today this is the only time we could do this. As such, joining us this week, um, I'll be honest, I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce your name.
Totally
Right.
fine. You're not the first one. Pretty much easy. It's Frederick with an M, so Mederic.
Mederic, gotcha. So, I was wondering how that was pronounced. Okay. Well, Mederic, good to have you this morning. Right. So we like to get started by getting to know the person behind the game and the studio and whatnot. And we like to start things off by asking, what got you interested in video games, both on a personal and a professional level?
Good question. I mean, on a personal level, it was always, I don't know, the concept of escaping the simple world of the human beings to just explore some new universes. It's a perfect entertainment. It's a lot of times it's great to just shut off your brain. So that's what got me into video games at first when I was a kid, and I stayed because of all the times I play with friends. It's a lot of fun for me to play games. But on a more professional level, it was a surprise, to say the truth. I was studying. I had a friend who was working in the studio I'm working in right now, and he offered me a job as a marketing person for the studio and a new project. And I was like, you know what, let's go. Why not? And I discovered one of the most interesting industries in the world right now.
In what fashion? Like, what makes this industry so interesting to you?
I mean, the passion mostly. People are it's amazing because I mean, I did a lot of shows and I traveled a lot for the game, and the people you meet are just amazingly passionate. Either they work in the industry and are super passionate about it, or just as gamers, they're, they're in love with this concept of video games, and it's such a pleasure to work with people that are passionate about what they're doing.
Like, can't disagree there. I mean, it's kind of a fixture of our program. Like, it's like, 9 times out of 10, yeah, the people who are talking about their thing um, are very passionate about that project. You know? And I assume that you found the same passion for, working at Playmind here.
Absolutely, yeah. So I started in this industry about 2 years ago, and it was it's kind of the first time you start. It's kind of a dream come true because you play as a kid while you're still living at your parents, and it's always the same story. What are you doing? You're losing, all this wasted time, and this is just entertainment that's not going to be any good for you, or you always hear the same thing. And then you start working in the industry, and you're like, you know what? All these hours, they're very, very, very important now because I know what I'm kind of I know what I'm working with, and I get to see the other side of video games production. It's crazy how far when we're gamers, how far we are from the idea of what it is to produce a game, the efforts, the time, the money, the people. It's impressive. It's really impressive, and it's a lot of fun to be able to see the other side of the wall for this. And so since I actually came into Playmind Studio, it's been an amazing experience. And well, I mean, you got to learn. You got to learn fast, and you got to be on top of things every single day. There's some new stuff coming in. In 2 years, stuff has changed a lot. So I can't even imagine what it is to have started working in this in the industry, like in the 90s or even in the 80s. You must these people must have seen so much changes. It's impressive, really impressive.
I can tell you that is indeed the case, as we have had people like all the way back from the 70s.
Oh my God, yeah.
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 It's like, yeah. And yeah, it's like how things were, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, were pretty different. Not everything, both for good and for ill. Well, it's like crunch remains a persistent problem no matter what the decade. I am learning. Like,
well, I mean, at least we're talking about the problem. It's always the first step. If you start putting it out there, usually it's the beginning of a big change. Let's hope so.
Right, but that's kind of beyond the scope of what we're talking about here. Anyway, and indeed, what we are talking about is a game called The Inner Friend. Like, Petty, do you have the trailer up and running?
I can have that up and running right now.
Okay.
Do we want audio or just have it playing in the background?
I think audio will do.
All right.
Right then. So there's a lot of to unpack here. Like, this is a very strange game.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. It's a very unique type of game. I would lying if I didn't say that it was kind of dark and eerie. But it's our first baby. Playmind's very first console and PC game.
Well, I suppose the first question I have is, what made Playmind want to venture into this direction in the first place? Right, some background on Playmind. They are or were a primarily AR company working on digital art, and about 2 years ago, um, you up and decided to make an adventure game.
Exactly. We have kind of a special kind of background, as you said. Even before AR, Playman actually was created in 2002 by our founder and CEO Emmanuel Sevigny, and he was completely alone in the as Playmind at the beginning for a few years, and he was doing mostly scenography, projections, like you said, digital arts, and that was Playmind for about 10 years. Like mostly arts and projections. He did some projections for artists, some shows, some DJs, some expositions, some world fairs, some stuff like that. And this idea of working with this child, the concept of having this child inside of you, existed in Emmanuel's mind for quite a while before he actually decided to create a game out of it. Actually, he was working with someone who had a background in games, but for something else, and he was
Mhm.
talking about this idea, and the person was like, "Well, I mean, you should make a game out of it. It's perfect. The premise is good. The idea is just perfect to make a game out of." And well, as you guys know, the video games are kind of the top, the best way to tell a story, because you have interaction, you have art, you have music, you have everything in one. So it was just logical. We had to make this into a game.
Yeah. Like it can be, provided you do it right.
Yeah,
I mean,
of course.
it's like, I mean, uh, how do I put this? There are a lot of video games out there that want to be movies. Like,
Yes, that's true. It's true.
it's like, and through, um, was there a particular aspect of the game or the story that could only be told in the medium of video games? And I'm not sure how much you can elaborate on that without like venturing into like spoilers.
Well, I mean, the concept of interaction is what brings you the closest, in my opinion, and Playmond's opinion as well. I mean, video games are the best way to actually create emotions because you actually interact with them. You are in total control of the character. So it's for us the best way to put yourself into the shoes of that character. In this case, we wanted people to be able to reconnect with a part of themselves, reconnect with their childhood, with some stuff like that. And so it was the perfect way, interaction was the perfect way to push them to reconnect with that. Not just, being, I shouldn't say numb, but in a way just watching and turning off your brain. You actually have something to do, so you have to interact with the world, to interact with the characters, and to actually put yourself back in the shoes of a child. So for us, it was the best way. It was definitely the best way to do it.
And indeed, what sort of interactions are you doing in the Inner Friend?
So most of the interactions in the inner friend are as puzzles. So you do have a lot of some people ask me a few times if it was a walking simulator, which it's not. It's mostly puzzle mechanics that are based on childhood games. Like I said, we wanted people to reconnect with that part of their life, and so we ended up putting a lot of mechanics that are based on classic childhood games, like, for example, Floor is Lava, Simon Says, Hide and Seek, Marco Polo. The old classics that are just timeless and that all kids end up playing one day or the other with their friends when they're really small, or before a certain age. Well, you can still keep playing those games after, but they're mostly played by kids. and that's how we push the people to reconnect with that part of their life. And we also have a lot of references to the 80s, and that's why we targeted maybe older gamers, people who didn't have as much time as others, and didn't want to spend 5 6 hours every night on a game while grinding and stuff like that. So it's a story that you can actually go through in one sitting, and that brings you back to a time when gamers like our creator, our founder, Emmanuel, when he was a child, it was in the 80s. So for him, it was a way to push people to reconnect with the past in a way.
Hmm. And what sort of references to the 80s are contained in the Inner Friend?
Oh God, many different ways to bring back the 80s. Well, I mean, the soundtrack is very 80s like. We have references to old movies. If you have been through the game, I don't want to spoil it too much, but you have some some direct and some less direct. But you have some references to Kubrick. To Poltergeist, you have some even the Room. When it's funny because when we saw the movie Ready Player One, the very last scene, which I don't want to spoil, but you had a room in that scene, and it's crazy how when I saw the movie, the room reminded me so much of that room that we have in the game, which is the hub of the game. You're recreating this safe haven, the child safe haven, which we think is the bedroom, where you feel the safest and you be yourself and be safe. So that's a part of the game that's very representative of the 80s. You have some very little symbols. I won't spoil them. Some of them will see them directly. Some others will just it will fly over their heads. But there's a lot of stuff. And since it's a game without any kind of dialogue or text, it's very visual. So you'll see a lot of references to the 80s in the environment and in the music itself, for sure.
Now, is what made you want to do a textless adventure game?
Well, it's a big challenge, that's for sure. When we actually, if you want the absolute truth about the development of the Inner Friend, it started out as a very, very different project. The first time we started creating this project, it was a Kinect game, and it had both 2D environments and 3D environments, which is completely different from what we have today. And we worked with this for a little while, and we ended up restarting everything from scratch because it was not the look and feel we wanted to create. But having this kind of wordless experience pushes you to think. You have to put the pieces together yourself, and it was a big challenge as well for us to be able to tell a story through the environment, the music, and the visuals, and to be able to touch people in different cultures. Because of course, we've all had different childhoods depending on where we live and where we were born, and of course, very many things that can make a childhood very different, but mostly this. And depending on when you were born and where you were born, you'll connect to this game differently, and that's something that we love. We don't want to give you the answers. We want you to be able to make them up yourself and to understand the game the way you want to understand it. So connect to it on a personal level.
And do you think you achieved that goal?
Well, from what we got, I think so. Yeah, we've had some very, very different theories. When people play the game, they come to us and they're like, okay, so I think this means that. And then you go see all the videos on YouTube and you look at the comments. I gather tons of them, and it's impressive. Really impressive how far people can go when they analyze some stuff. And we've had so many different theories. It's super interesting to read, actually.
And I suppose that beckons the question of, is this meant to be ambiguous, or is there a specific, reading that you were shooting for?
There is a specific reading, but it's not, it's not as specific as it could be with a game that has text and dialogues, if you know what I mean. So we have, of course, a main message and a main storyline, but there are a lot of aspects that are not exactly explained, and that's where there is a lot of space for interpretation.
I see. And uh, what has the feedback been from the people who played this outside of trying to suss out their theories?
Well, I mean, you know how it is with games. We have feedback going one way or the other, so it's completely different from one gamer to the other. It's crazy how different it can be. Some people thought it was too easy. Some people thought it was too short. Too short, we got a lot. We wanted to tell a short story, and a lot of people were like, "Well, I mean, I wish it was longer." So that could have been something we did, but you know how it is, indie development and budget and stuff like that. So we had to cut short on the production to be able to actually make a complete game. But the feedback has been really impressive. Some people fell in love with the game, really loved the art style and the story. I had somebody come up to me, PAX. We were at PAX East this year, and somebody played one of the levels at the demo and came up to me almost crying and was like, did you guys suffer from any kind of abuse when you were children? And we were like, I mean, it depends. I wouldn't go too much in details, but they were like, this struck me so intensely. The person was, had, of course, some issues during their childhood, and the reaction was amazing. She was like, it really disturbed me, but in a really good way. I really connected, brought me back some really painful memories, but at the same time, I know I've come across those, so I know I grew above these issues. But it was a really strong feeling that brought me back to these times in life, and I'm really glad that some people actually create games like that push the boundaries of just gaming to something, something more, recreating and creating emotions and pushing you to connect with some parts of your life that you may have forgotten. So and you have that, and on the other side you have, oh, this was a shitty game, there's no gameplay. So it's you have a bit of everything,
Uh, grant Understandable. There are, let's say, dueling ethos as to what a game should be and what it should do. Let's say.
That's very true. Well, I took this. I don't remember who told me that exactly, but there's as many types of gamers that there are gamers, actually. So we're all unique. We all have different tastes, and even though we like battle royales, or we like this type of game, or we like a different type of game, we all love them for different reasons. Connect them. So every gamer is its very unique type.
No doubt, no doubt. And anyway, digging uh, deeper into the presentation of the game, you mentioned that this is a very visual game because there's no dialogue or text. But one thing I don't think we've touched upon is sound. Like, is this an oral game as well?
Absolutely, absolutely. In this type of game, which is very atmospheric, narrative driven, but without text or dialogues, the sound is super important. We worked with some local talent in Montreal. Some people that worked on. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Thunder Lotus. They made Jotun, which is a game about
Yes.
exactly.
I know of them. We haven't had them on the show to date, but we reviewed Jotun some time ago.
Yeah, so these guys, they were called Pixel Audio. Guys who did the sound design and all the music. They worked on those two games with Thunder Lotus and many more games, and they've been amazing. They've been really amazing. We had some discussions with them, some meetings, just to be able to nail down exactly the feeling, the vibe of every level, wanted people to feel. and they've been amazing, really amazing. They have everything on point, very professional, very talented. They've done some really amazing work on this game. I'm still talking with them to actually maybe release a soundtrack for this game because I personally think that all the music that was made for this game is amazing. Uh,
Mhm.
in general, their work has been perfect. Well, I mean, perfect. I shouldn't say that's subjective, but the work has been really amazing.
Hmm. I mean, you certainly seem proud of what they have done. Um, now, do you use music and or sound to like complete puzzles in the game?
Yeah, actually, we have one of the references to the '80s. I'm sure
Hmm.
you guys are very familiar with the Encounter of the third kind. The old movie. There's a very
Hmm.
Yeah.
specific scene that everybody knows where they actually
Yeah.
communicate with the the ship, or
Right.
and they use music to do that, and the ship actually answers them. We have one puzzle in the game that's very uh, similar to that. So it's a big reference to that movie, of course.
Indeed. Though that does bring up another question of mine: is um, what if someone was hard of hearing or flat out deaf? Um, how would they be able to deal with that puzzle?
Um, well, the puzzle has a visual side to it. We added the sound just to because this references for us was very strong and we really loved it. But the puzzle is part sound and part visual, so you don't actually need the sound to complete the puzzle.
Okay.
But to actually get the reference, it's better to have the sound for sure. But the game is, I mean, the game is all playable without the sound, definitely. But
Okay.
the experience is not going to be as atmospheric, I have to say. Be totally truthful, but it's completely playable without sound.
Okay. Still, that's good to hear. Honestly, this is one of my biggest problems with the game. Miss. It's got some and Riven. It's got some stuff where if you don't hear the sound, you're not getting through.
Hmm.
And it's like not everybody can hear sound.
Well, yeah, that's a problem. Thinking. I think we're getting better at that, but thinking about everybody who wants to play your game and making it available and accessible
Yeah.
as accessible as possible, it can be quite a challenge. Actually, it can be really a big challenge, and it can, if you're able to do it, it's definitely worth it. I mean, for me, it's everybody should be able to play your game. Sometimes
Hmm.
that means uh, adding some costs over stuff and rethinking the design if you didn't think about that at first. And sometimes
Right.
it can be really hard to do for indies. So I can understand people who didn't do it on the first game or didn't think about it when they first created the game and decided to go without it because it's just too complicated to read it stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But in our case, we wanted to be able, to be as accessible as possible.
Well, that's good to hear. Um, anyway, so getting into like the narrative of the game,
Mhm.
um, like who is the? I hesitate to use the word person because the main character looks like uh, it's like I don't know, a mannequin.
And mannequin's not bad. Mannequin's not bad. Usually, since we don't want to put specific words, we just use entity. But it can be. I mean, so this is the case. We created something that
Hmm.
has no sex, no age, no face, because it's just a representation of a part of yourself. So it could be anybody. So that's why it doesn't have any very specific features. The only thing you know is that it's a child, but the rest is could be anyone. It could be anyone, and that's why we made something that's very generic in a way. We talked about it because some people thought it could hurt us to not have a very recognizable character, but I think it's still pretty recognizable. You have this, mannequin, like you say, this white mannequin that has some missing pieces.
Hmm.
People usually recognize it pretty easily.
Indeed. I mean, it's more representation than some other uh, adventure games I can think of, where they just have like, say, a first person perspective, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with the term Afghan-Cap.
Um, I don't think so.
It's basically ageless, sexless adventure type,
Yeah.
like.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, it is. The avatar here is at the very least very striking,
Mhm,
very attention grabbing.
mhm. Well,
Um,
it's a funny thing as well because when I talk to some people about that, they're like, "Yeah, well, if you want immersion and you want people to think they're in the game, why don't you put them in first person?" And that's a funny thing because we wanted. It's not just thinking you're in the game, but this is kind of controlling a projection of yourself because it's not you exactly. It's just a little part of you that's going through your subconscious mind. So it's not exactly you with your body because the body, if we really go deeper in things, the body, for a lot of people, the body is considered as a vessel to go
mhm.
through life, while the mind itself is something different. It's completely detached from the body and has its a life of its own. And in this case, it's a part of that mind that you're controlling throughout the game.
Hmm. And I'm guessing that the overall setting is the mind's eye here.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, it's very it's a very dark kind of setting because well, the premise of the game is that basically you're disconnected from a part of yourself, and that part of yourself actually created this universe based on his nightmares and fears. So of course, it has to be kind of dark. Um, but the whole environment, the whole atmosphere of the game is, it's built on nightmares, so it has to has to have a dark kind of atmosphere.
Hmm. Indeed. And now, in terms of like the nightmares and content, is it just thematic, or is there more visceral elements to the horror?
From one level to the other, I have to say it's pretty different. We have some levels are very stressful. You feel the tension, you feel the weight on your shoulders of this nightmare. Some others are very more atmospheric. You have a level in the hospital, which is was the most troubling for a lot of people, but there's not a lot of interaction at that level. But people were just super freaked out by it. Some others are more familiar. Some others are very specific. You have a level in a hair salon, which is, a lot of people are like, well, I've never seen that. Well, for one of our creators, one of our designers, it was very traumatizing experience, and it ended up in the game, and it's basically one of the most intense levels in the whole game. So it's a mix of many different things. Some are more familiar, some are more generic, some are very specific. It's different from one level to the other, basically.
Interesting. And how many levels are there in?
I think we have about, if we count them all, about 10 levels in the game. It's a game that's can be played in between 2 and 3 hours. You can finish the game.
Um. Anyway, so shifting a bit to the technical side of the game, what sort of middleware was used? Is this game built in Unity, Unreal?
Um, so if you remember the thing I told you about the two parts of production, we started out the game when it was a Kinect game. It was built on Unity, and
Hmm.
we ended up seeing and search and everything, and we ended up going with Unreal for the final game because for the atmosphere and the visuals we wanted to recreate and to create, it was just much better to go with this game.
Hmm. Like, not the first time I've heard that. especially when switching from Unity to Unreal. And how long would you say that it took to create the interface?
Well, I mean, if you if you take the two parts of the production and the restart from scratch, we're talking about 4 years. 2 years for the final product in Unreal, but if you think about both productions, it's about 4 years to get the final interface. So, a long time.
Yeah, that is quite lengthy.
Yeah, definitely.
And
we actually had to rebuild part of the team when we switched to Unreal because, of course, as you know, a lot of programmers and developers are very used to Unity, and they switch to Unreal. It's you have a big learning curve. So we had to hire some new devs who were already comfortable with Unreal. So part of the team had to be completely changed. But I mean, it ended up being a really nice production timeline. We didn't even have to crunch because we organized the time accordingly to avoid this kind of practice, and we're all super happy that we were able to release the game without crunch.
yeah, as are we. Like, crunch is a big problem.
It is. It is.
It's like, especially with all the stories that are coming out recently.
Yeah.
Like,
stories are really absolutely. I would be happy to be working in this kind of studio. Well, I mean, I say that it's a funny thing, because some people would give anything to work in some studios. So for them, crunch is a very small sacrifice.
I'm aware of this. It's part of the problem.
Exactly.
But once again, that's a bit off track.
True. Sorry, my bad.
Yeah. No. It's fine. It's fine. It's just recentering on the game itself. Was this game? Is it Windows only or available for Mac and Linux?
For now, it's Windows. Didn't think about Mac because, well, I mean, it's more work. The market is just so small on Mac. So now it runs on Windows only, sadly, for PC. But we're porting the game right now, PlayStation and Xbox.
Right. And is it 1-to-1 for the consoles?
You mean is it the same game?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's absolutely the same game. We're actually just adding a little bit of background, backstory to the game. It can be unlocked if you collect. We have collectibles in the game to just populate the bedroom and make it more homey. And if you actually find all those collectibles, we'll be adding a cutscene. But the cutscene is going to be added to the PC build as well because we want people to be able to get a little more information if they so desire. But basically the same game, yeah.
I see. And I suppose it would be prudent to ask if there are any Switch plans in the equation.
Sadly, the Switch, in our case, since a little bit of a rough production timeline at some point, we didn't, we ended up trying to see cost of the Switch and what would it be for us, on timeline and costs and everything, and it's too much. It's too much work for us, and most of the team is actually working already on a new project. So Switch has, well, I mean, we of course thought about it because the Switch is amazing, but I don't think we'll have the time or the budget to go on the Switch, sadly.
That is unfortunate, but yeah, it's like the Switch is a bit more of a tight squeeze, let's say, because it's not just a matter of porting the game to, it's not a 1-to-1 transfer. PlayStation 4 or the Xbox One, you're gonna have to make compromises somewhere.
Exactly.
So it is understandable why a game that is targeting the generation hardware would avoid the Switch. Anyway, back on the PC, is this game available only on Steam, or is it is there a GOG version?
We don't have a GOG version because they thought the game was too short, which is a little bit surprising for us. But we're not GOG, so we can't decide for that. But we have the game on Steam. We have the game on Humble. We have the game on Greenman. If people, some people are keen to giving their money to other platforms because they think Steam is just becoming too big. But so we do have it on those stores as well. But it's mostly Steam. You know how it is. Steam takes
Yes.
a huge chunk of the market, but we did put the game on other other storefronts as well, just because we understand some people want to have their own little storefront and give the money to some others than the huge ones.
Right. Like, it's like that is unfortunate to hear about GOG.
Yeah.
Like, once again, it's why I'm in general not in favor of curation. That
Well,
leads to games getting dismissed for arbitrary reasons.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, believe me, you are not the first person to ever mention that. Probably won't be the last.
No.
But it is what it is. Right. So I'll see if my colleagues here have any further questions for you.
I think I'm good.
Yeah, interested to see how it goes, but I don't have any immediate questions.
That's okay then. Well, I think my final question is: are there any plans for a physical of the Inner Friend?
We did discuss having a physical copy of the game. Problem is, the game is it's a funny thing, but the game is not expensive enough to be put in a physical version. The people we talked with were all about the price. For that. Since we don't have such a big market for them, it was complicated to put the game in a physical form because the cost of actually producing all the physical copies was too high when you compared it to the price of the sell. So it's been a tough decision, but we had to go without it.
That kind of makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a complicated market, the physical copy.
Once again, that is unfortunate, but it is also understandable.
Uh-huh.
No, well. Anyway, so is there anything you can mention about the next project from Playmind?
Yeah, we're pretty excited about that. We're actually going in a very different direction, and we're tackling a big challenge. We're actually going for a multiplayer game. So you know how it can be in the indie scene with multiplayer games. So we're pretty excited to tackle this kind of challenge. And, but that's the only thing I can say for now. But it's going to be interesting for sure. We're all pretty excited.
Certainly, interested in it in the general sense. There's not much to talk about.
No, exactly. We're still prototyping it, working hard, testing a lot in the studio, but we're having a lot of fun while testing it. So I think we got something that's going to be fun for everyone, but we still have a lot of stuff to nail down. So we don't talk too much about it, not to get too much hype. But as soon as we have something to show, I'm very keen on the concept of showing the game early so we can have some feedback and get the gamers and other developers in the process to be sure that we're making something that people want to play.
Well, maybe we'll have you back on the show when that's ready to be talked about.
Oh, why not?
I'm like, indeed. Anyway, so is there a release date for the console version of the Inner Friend yet, or is that still up in the air?
Still a little bit up in the air. We don't have a specific date, but it should be ready before the end of the summer.
Okay. Okay then. So the game is The Inner Friend. It's available now on Steam and Humble Bundle, a few other PC storefronts, and it is coming to the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One this summer. It retails for $14.99. So be sure to pick it up today.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. All right, so that'll about do it for this installment of Fragments Silicon. Be sure to tune in on Sunday for our review show. We'll be reviewing Guard Party. Petty Fan will be handling Puyo Puyo Champions, and there will be Abstract Hell. And until then, I wish you good gaming.